So the shop's a bit of a mess right now. We've brought everything back from Chris Nowak's place. Engine is off the dyno. We're happy with what we achieved. We did learn some things. Like I said in one of the other videos, we're gonna completely rework our throttle bodies when it comes to linkage, butterfly shafts, butterflies, all of that, and we're gonna increase the bore a little bit, but everything above the intake manifold we're gonna change, but we're happy with our results. We did learn a lot while we were at the dyno. We didn't make the horsepower number that we wanted to make, but we were close. And we do believe that it's achievable. We're gonna move on. A couple things I wanted to mention. So we've got our Forgeline wheels, they're in-house right now, but I have to put the rear end together. But one of the things that we used in order to get the measurements that we needed, because we changed the rear end, we put a complete new front suspension in the car. So we were starting from zero. We needed to come up with some measurements so that we could develop all the measurements that Forgeline needed so that they could create our wheels. We've got a couple of different appliances that we used for putting our tires in place, because we went with bigger tires, we're going to run bigger wheels, and we had to get all of our measurements, and they had to be right so that when Forgeline sent the wheels, they weren't the wrong wheels. This one is laser cut out of thin sheet steel. This one is made out of aluminum. They both worked about the same. I would recommend either one, especially if you're trying to develop a measurement for your wheels and your tires. As you can see, we're going with a little bit different width of tire. We're close to the same height, but we had to make sure that everything was right, or we were going to spend a lot of money on the wrong wheel. I really recommend getting some of those gauges or those appliances to fit your wheel. Our 9-inch forward housing is back from powder coat. We're ready to start assembling it, but one of the big things that you need to do is make sure that this thing is really cleaned up. It was at the sandblaster. It got cleaned after that. It went to the powder coater. It was cleaned while it was there. They did their powder coating. Patriot did it. They're out in Pacific, Missouri. They did a great job. First time we used them, we're happy with it. One other thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to run these threads. You're going to chase those with a die. And a lot of times, if they're fairly in good shape, you can just run them on by hand. Worst case scenario is you'll have to use a socket and run them down if they got a little bit of debris in them. Sometimes it's hard to run them down with your fingers. You will have to do some cleanup after this, because you are going to create a little bit of debris that's going to come out of the threads. Once that's done, we'll clean it one more time and we get ready to start assembling our 9-inch forward rear end. Throwing a little bit of tap magic on your die when you're running across those threads probably isn't a bad idea. That way you don't take the chance of galding those threads. So the surface where you're going to put your sealant, because we're not going to run a gasket, we're just going to run sealant in these areas. You want to make sure that that's good and clean. All right, we're ready to assemble our 9-inch forward rear end. Sealing surface is cleaned. We ran our threads. Sealing surface is clean. We're ready to put our strange third member that we got from Quick Performance into our housing. So some things that we're going to pay close attention to is we want to make sure that we use the right sealer. So we've got some Ultra Black, which is oil resistant gasket maker from Permatex. A lot of people use brass washers, or copper washers, I'm sorry, as a sealing washer after you put your nuts on to hold your third member in. I'm going to use aluminum. They'll serve as a sealing washer, and they'll kind of match our third member. I believe I'm going to be okay with that. I've never done it before, but I'm going to try it. So we'll crack open this Ultra Black and start putting it on our surface. I'll show you how I apply that, and then we'll get our third member tucked in. We've got our Ultra Black Permatex gasket maker, and basically our sealing surface is, between here and here. You don't want too much so that it all runs out or anything like that. You kind of got to hit the happy medium. But one of the things that you are going to want to do is, once you start applying it, make a circle around your stud. I'm going to call that about a 1/4 inch bead. And again, you can always wipe off any excess that squishes out. Go around your stud, tie it in almost like it's a weld. And again, if you guys have any other ideas that you think works better, please leave it in the comments. And then we'll set our third member down on there. Whenever we tighten up our nuts, we're going to tighten in kind of a star pattern, but I'll show you that. Now, our studs are just a little bit tight on the aluminum dropping in. I don't want to disadvantage myself by making any changes in the hole size. So I have to tap, and I've had this third member in and out of this housing a number of times. But once you get it down, you just got to tap it down, and it leaves a little bit of aluminum just on a couple of threads, but you just wipe it off and away you go. Now, as you can see, we've got a little bit of carryover, which is we want to make sure that we fill that space. Got these aluminum washers from All-Star Performance. Drop a couple of them on. I mean, we'll put them all on. But I'm going to get those in place and then snug down our lock nuts and try to get a good even pull so that third member runs up against our sealer and we get even distribution of that sealer. And I can see my sealant, my gasket maker coming out. Got one that's hidden. that I can't get the socket on. Actually, two of them, I think. And everything's snugged up. We bounced around, kind of star patterned it. I'm gonna let that sealer dry, and then I'm gonna come in with a little X-Acto knife and trim that off so that it's not hanging out. So that'll make it nice and pretty, rather than trying wiping it out of there while it's wet. It's got a torque arm suspension in it. So you've got your torque arm, we've got a Watts link in the back rather than a pannered bar, and then coilover shocks. So it's way easier to put this thing back in the car if you attach the torque arm. Leave the axles out of it, leave the brakes on it, get it all attached and up in the car, and then start to put all the other attachments to it. So that's what I'm gonna do. is hung. So here's our Bear Brakes Detroit Speed rear brake package. So our emergency brake is made into our bearing retainer, which is got your emergency brake on the back side of it, and it also retains that bearing up against that bearing plate. Our rotors, our calipers. If anybody remembers from my other videos, this rear end had no back brace on it. We installed that. We installed the fill cap, and then we took a little over an inch off of the axle housing on both sides, and then we narrowed up our attachment right here. The one thing that we're not so sure of is we think that our lower control arm, we're gonna have to put a bend in it to get our big tires and wheels on it. As long as we make it to where we figure one side we are going to make to where it's non-adjustable. We're probably gonna tack the heim to the tube, but there's a good chance we're gonna have to run a bent tube. So everything's tightened up. I'm gonna start assembling. I'm gonna put the axles in and start assembling the brakes so we can fit our rear wheels. So for fit up, like when we were, doing all our measuring, and we had the brakes and the axles in and out of this thing numerous times, I would use a non-nylock type nut. I would just use a regular hex nut. So since I do believe that we're going back, this should be the last time we're going back together. So I'm putting nylock nuts and the proper T-bolts and everything in place as if I don't have to take it back apart. And I hope I don't. And that has captured our bearing. Our bearing is held in the housing. The seal is inside of the bearing flange. That's attached. So that this arm on the back for the emergency brake has to be in the right place so that the pin that's in between these two pieces that push on this brake, basically this brake shoe, those have to be in the right place, so I had to place it just then. All right, moment of truth. We're gonna put the Forgeline wheel on this side. Our studs are a tad bit long, but we weren't for sure what we were going to do as far as a wheel in the beginning. So we went ahead and had the axles come with like the race long studs. Okay, right rear's on, and I'm going to go ahead and assemble the left rear, and then we're going to try to put the thing down at ride height and see where the tires end up. All right, we'll put her down. Put it down on the ground, and we should be pretty good. We widened a few things out. Again, we measured it really good. We're not so sure that we're happy with the color. We're currently talking to Forgeline about that, but so far so good.